Shall we rush into the second half? Is that all right? Yeah. Our next story is an excerpt from Winter Lambing by Virginia Gilbert. I'll have to ask you to bear with me because there's rather a lot of honors to go through in this bio. Virginia Gilbert is a BAFTA-nominated, award-winning writer and director. She writes and directs for film, radio, and television, and her screenwriting work has been placed on the Brit list. She was named as a Star of Tomorrow by Screen International, and she writes short fiction and has been published internationally. Her short stories have been shortlisted for the RTE Francis McManus Award and BBC Radio 4 broadcast season of her work. Her debut collection of short fiction was shortlisted for the Scott Prize 2011, and she's preparing for her debut feature film as a writer-director, which starts shooting in April 2012. And shortlisted for the Willesden International. Yeah. The scene we're going to see from Winter Lambing, it's for the second time transported to a frosty night on an Irish farm, where Donald? Sorry, I have an American uncle named Donald. Donald struggles with the difficult birth of twin lambs, while his brother's laid up in bed with a fever. Tensions in the household boil over, and the allegory of the poorly twin lamb and its reluctant mother, Ewe, is echoed in the disquiet of the house as Donald's mother takes sides between her two sons. So this excerpt starts our story, and the reader is Rob Whitcomb.
It's not very hot.
Come on, blast you! Donald struggled on the wet straw, almost slipping. The ewe, lying on her side, bleated pitifully, and a shudder passed through her. Donald steadied himself, squaring his feet as he took hold of the small, bloody forelegs protruding from the sheep's backside. The head of the lamb wasn't yet visible, but it soon would be, and Donald pulled hard, willing the ewe to help him, to rally her spirits and push the thing out. But there was no give, and Donald had to summon all his strength and yank hard. Suddenly, in a rush, the lamb slithered out, sliding across the floor. Panting, Donald gathered it up and gave it a quick once-over, clearing the mucus from its nose and mouth. It was breathing. No trouble. But he could feel the creature's heartbeat, even through his layers of clothes, and placed it at the head of its mother. It took her a moment or two, but slowly she began to lick her bloodied offspring, and Donald knew he could leave them for a little while. Well, he'd have to. There was another one yet to come. He'd figured out it was going to be twins, and given the size of her the last while, though you could never be certain. But the contractions were still going, and when Donald reached inside to check, sure enough, he took hold of another set of legs. This one came easier, and was gliding out. Much smaller than its sibling, it was also more mottled in colour. A darker fleece, not black, but a sort of grey, silver, as far as he could tell, though stains and dampness might account for it. Again, he cleared the mucus from its nose and mouth. But the creature didn't respond. Quickly, Donald bent and then picked up a piece of straw, tickling the nostrils. Still nothing. Well, he took the lamb by the back legs and gently swung it a couple of times in a circle over his head. He checked again, putting his face close to the mouth. Well, he could feel the faintest whisper of breath, and he swung the lamb again. Better. And he took the second infant to its mother, who had licked her firstborn clean. He replaced one with the other and then set about clipping the cord of the first and cleansing what remained. The first lamb was sturdy. It was a sturdy little fellow, stocky and well built. He'd fattened nicely. Donald checked the ewe's teats to make sure things were visible and flowing, for lambs were not the brightest of creatures and would often suck away at a piece of knotted fleece. Everything in order. He set the first one down to suckle. It fed hungrily, and the ewe let out a small bleat. Pleasure, perhaps, or surprise. Donald straightened up, feeling his lower back click ominously. Well, he was hot under his clothes and could feel the perspiration on his vest, and he knew he couldn't linger long, standing idle, else he'd catch a cold. The barn was draughty, and the frost was already set on the ground outside. It was the bitterest winter they'd seen for years. And winter lambing was always a pain, but this year, the cold made it treacherous. Back to work again. He moved to the head of the ewe to collect the second lamb. But to his dismay, he saw that the ewe had not touched it. It was still covered in blood and muck, laying some inches from its mother's face, its small body still trembling. Donald sighed. He nudged the lamb closer to its mother, but in a display of complete defiance, the ewe turned her face away. "Come on," he urged. She would still not heed him. He'd have to act fast, and with a sinking heart, he recognised that hours of work would follow now if he wanted to save the second lamb. Exhaustion washed over him in a wave, and he cursed his younger brother, not to be seen since lunch. And where was Billy when he needed him, the lazy bugger? Didn't he know Donald had been up since dawn? And what good was a spare pair of hands if they were never around? Moving fast now, as much for himself as for the lamb, Donald rubbed it down, clipped the cord and set it to suckle, hoping against hope that the ewe would take it. No such luck. And with a surprising strength, given the work she'd just put in, she heaved herself upright and trotted off, her firstborn trailing her, anxious for more food. And she settled a distance from Donal and her second, and there, gentle and maternal, she nudged her favoured infant back to the teat. The creature in his arms had ceased its trembling. But Donal knew it wouldn't have long if it didn't get fed. He placed it down on a nest of straw close by and set to work, nudging and dragging the ewe to one of the improvised stanchions he'd built in the corner. 2 wooden posts with a horizontal bar to keep the sheep in place, a rudimentary set of stocks. She bleated angrily, resisting his efforts. She'd been through this before with Donal, and she was an older ewe, experienced in the ways of farmers and their tricks. For a brief moment, as he was securing her head fast between the posts, Donal locked eyes with her, and, in the depths of her milky blue irises, he could have sworn she was looking at him with reproach. "Tough luck, old girl," he told her. "But you won't get away on this one, no, not again." With the ewe firmly secured, and unable to turn her head to see which lamb was suckling, Donal put the bleating firstborn back to feed and went to fetch the second. As he placed it at its mother's teat, the ewe tensed up and writhed a little, but he knew she would not risk rejecting the wrong one. After a moment, she calmed, and the smaller lamb, side by side with his brother, began to drink.